It's Wednesday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are as well. Happy first day of spring. Actually, no, it's the end of January, but it feels like it out there. Enjoy it while it lasts is what I'll say to that. And good show coming up. Just a little bit here. Chip Scoggins will join me from the Star Tribune. Talk to him on a number of subjects. The Timberwolves, a little bit of Twins talk as well, plus a tiny bit of Vikings TJ Hawkinson discussion at the end of our segment as well. So look forward to that in a little bit. Got some additional Wolves thoughts at the end, some ridiculousness from the NBA and their 2-minute report after the end of that Wolves Oklahoma City game, saying no, that wasn't a foul when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander grabbed Ant's arm on his dunk, the play that made Ant extra mad. It'll make him extra mad to hear that no, upon further review, when they looked at it, when they had every opportunity to look at it that we all did, they said, nope, that wasn't a foul. Grabbing the arm on a dunk, I guess, is okay now in the NBA as long as it's happening to the Wolves, not against not the Wolves doing it. So get to that a little bit at the end of the show, as well as some favorable matchups in tonight's game for the Wolves. First, though, what I miss. Went down a rabbit hole. I'll admit it. I got sucked into a kind of a 3-part trilogy of off-season quarterbacks in the NFL. I know it's January, right? It's January still. What am I doing? This process has months to play out. Kirk Cousins won't be a free agent officially for another month and a half. The draft isn't for about 3 months, but still here I am looking at 3 things, trying to make the math work, trying to understand where this is all headed. Looking at ESPN's ranking of the top 50 free agents in the NFL, which was interesting to me. B, thinking through which teams in the NFL have true quarterback needs and which ones will be looking for perhaps free agents, draft picks, whatnot, and what teams have cap space to address those quarterback concerns. That kind of vertex, that kind of overlapping Venn diagram kind of sets the market for Kirk Cousins and kind of gives you an idea of where this could be headed. So ESPN's listing of the top 50 free agents in the NFL, 2 quarterbacks on the entire list. Maybe that's not shocking because really good quarterbacks don't generally make it to free agency. Remember when Kirk Cousins signed here 6 years ago? It was a surprise that someone of his caliber was a true free agent. Well, Kirk Cousins, even coming off his Achilles injury, even at his age 36 season coming up, number 3 on the entire board, according to ESPN. Number 3, and surely the best quarterback available in free agency. That's pretty high. That shows you where he is regarded, at least on this list. Shows you kind of where he sits in the market. Clearly the best quarterback available as a free agent, at least if we believe this, at least in terms of who might actually be available. Only other quarterback on that list was Baker Mayfield at number 13. He seems reasonably likely to go back to Tampa Bay, more certain, I would say, than Cousins going back to Minnesota. So that sets the free agency market. That sets the picture of where everybody is at in terms of shuffling the deck. If someone's going to go after a quarterback in free agency and has the cap space, it is going to be a team probably pursuing Kirk Cousins if they believe they have a window to win of 2 to 3 years. Who could spend that much money? Who are the quarterback needy teams? Let's talk about the quarterback needy teams first. I've got the Falcons, the Bears, the Broncos, Vegas, the Vikings, New England, Washington, Tampa Bay, and maybe Pittsburgh, although Kenny Pickett was a first-round pick just a couple years ago. They've got something invested in him. I don't know if they would really go this route so soon, and they've got some possible backups. So let's talk about 8 or 9 teams with that possibility of trying to draft or trade for or sign a free agent this offseason. Now, who's going to be available? Who could be a starter next year that's available either in the draft, free agency, or potentially via trade? Kirk Cousins, obviously in that mix as far as free agents go. So is Baker Mayfield, although if we match him up with Tampa Bay, that's a pretty easy 1-for-1. Russell Wilson, probably going to get cut by the Broncos. Like I said, they have a need perhaps at quarterback. So that's kind of a 1-for-1, 1 in, 1 out. Gardner Minshew could be an option for somebody, and that would mean, but that doesn't mean Indianapolis needs anybody because they obviously have Anthony Richardson, who got hurt this past season, and Minshew filled in nicely there. Justin Fields probably going to be a starter somewhere next year. If the Bears take Caleb Williams, they'll trade Justin Fields somewhere. And then you've got the three kind of blue chip quarterback prospects: Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, probably going to be year one starters, if not day one starters. You would imagine they would be taking over pretty soon in next year, and that's going to be a team's starting likely caliber player right away. So you've got 8 or 9 teams, 8 guys probably in that mix. So Kirk Cousins has an opportunity to go somewhere else, but the Vikings are, of course, one of those potential quarterback needy teams, and Kirk Cousins would fit in there. Now, the Vikings could do both, right? They could get Kirk Cousins back in the fold for like a 2-year deal and draft somebody, maybe not at 11, maybe down at 42. I see one spot in ESPN says they could take J.J. McCarthy at 42 if he fell that far. I don't know what the Vikings want to do there. I feel like that's kind of a half measure, but anyway, that's a possibility for them. So now, let's establish what teams could even go after Kirk Cousins or are likely to go after Kirk Cousins in the free agency market. So the teams I listed were, again, just to recap, the teams I listed that need quarterbacks next year: Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, Vegas, Vikings, New England, Washington, Tampa Bay, maybe the Steelers. Now, who of those teams would be likely to get one in free agency? Probably not the Bears. They've got the number 1 overall pick. Probably not Denver, because Denver's in cap jail basically because of that bad Russell Wilson contract. Maybe Vegas. That's an interesting one to think about. Probably Atlanta. Atlanta's in a good spot to maybe be a bidder for Kirk Cousins. The Vikings too. New England, I don't think so. They got a top 3 pick. They're not going to use it on. Not going to use cap space on a quarterback. Same with New England. They have a top 3 pick. They can get one of those top 3 guys. Washington is interesting. They have the cap space and potentially the need. I don't know if that would be a reunion spot for Kirk Cousins though, but that one makes sense from a certain standpoint. Tampa Bay doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because if you're going to go with a veteran, again, you probably go with Baker Mayfield. Steelers, I just don't see that as a fit from a cap situation standpoint. So looking at the cap space, you're looking at Washington has the most cap space next year. So that'd be a team to watch if they made a big play 6 years later for Kirk Cousins. That just doesn't seem like a likely scenario in my mind, but you never know. Then you're also talking about a team like the Raiders with $36 million in cap space. That's a possibility. And the Falcons, they've got $25 million in cap space. Obviously, Cousins is going to cost more than that. But if you have that much cap space, you can make the money work. Vikings also around $25 million, so they can make this work. They've got $28 million on the books right now for Kirk Cousins in 2024 in dead money. A restructure, a new deal would probably make that number right around the same or even a little bit less and could push some money into the future. So how this all plays out is just fascinating to me. I don't think we're going to know this for a while, but just kind of laying this all out there, seeing that there's only really, outside of the Vikings, there's really only 2 or 3 teams that really would be interested and able to get Kirk Cousins, even if he's the top quarterback free agent available. Seeing how the draft plays out and that the top 3 guys, the Vikings are really hurt because all 3 of the teams with those top 3 picks that could take those 3 best quarterbacks, all 3 of them need quarterbacks. That's kind of rare, right? Usually a team has bottomed out and they need a quarterback at the top of that draft, but usually there's like 1 or 2 that maybe played a rookie quarterback and, don't need that quarterback in that second year or picking high again. That would be Carolina this year, but Carolina owes the Bears that number 1 overall pick. That means the Bears have a quarterback need. That means Washington has a quarterback need. That means New England has a quarterback need. It's going to be hard for the Vikings to jump into the top 3 when all 3 of those teams have quarterback needs. So that's what's kind of driving this market right now. The Vikings are kind of in a spot where their best option might be go back to Kirk Cousins for another couple of years and draft somebody else at 42 or trade down from 11 and still be able to draft a quarterback if you like somebody enough to invest that. That's the bigger question too. Do they like someone enough to invest that much in that pick? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm interested in the market for Kirk Cousins through all of this exercise. Kind of the the stature of Cousins versus the kind of small market of teams that would be in the interested in a quarterback, and how that is going to impact how this all plays out in a couple months.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
Let's bring in Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist, to talk about a bunch of things. Chip, at the Star Tribune, Chip, you are certainly one of the adults in the room. I think we have a pretty mature group at the Star Tribune, but I don't know if I'd call you the Mike Conley Jr. of the Star Tribune, but you do hold things together in a certain way. But I don't think we need that entirely from you. The way that the Wolves have seemed to need Mike Conley Jr. outside of Monday. Now let's talk about Monday's game, because I think you wrote about it. I wrote about it. That was a big one to me.
Yep.
Your take on the Wolves beating Oklahoma City without Mike Conley Jr.
Yeah, and as a good segue about maturity, that storyline and the fact that the last 2 weeks in the Wolves, this kind of mini funk that they've been in has become a referendum on the maturity, has sort of driven me crazy, because this team should be beyond that, right? This is not a young team.
Yeah.
This is a team last year that we all said was not serious, that they couldn't be taken serious the way they disrespected games and didn't show up for others and lost to really bad teams. I felt like they were moved beyond that this year and had a renewed sense of purpose. And so the fact that, and Mike Conley's great. He's, a true pro and all the accolades he deserves. But does that mean that everything has to unravel if he misses a couple games and they just kind of fall apart and the offense and just looks chaotic? It shouldn't be that way. And so that, to me, was the biggest thing about Monday night's win at Oklahoma City was Mike Conley didn't play. In the fourth quarter, you saw a team that played maturely. We all talk about Ant's dunk, and that was spectacular. But I looked to a couple plays before that. I know the one he was going to drive, there wasn't anything there, and he kicked it to the corner to Jaden McDaniels for a three. That's the winning basketball play. Instead of going in there 1-on-3 or 1-on-4 and trying to force up a shot or have a turnover, like that is how they can win. And I thought he was under control. The defense was spectacular, as they typically are. Chris Finch had a very bad game against San Antonio with his combinations and rotations, particularly at the start of the fourth quarter, where he put a bunch of non-shooters on the floor together.
Yeah,
I think he learned from that. His combinations last night made sense and put them in favorable matchups. And so I there was so much about that game I liked. And as we were talking about before coming on here, they needed that in the worst way, because the air around the team was starting to feel heavy.
Yeah, and fair or not, like this is a fan base with more scars than you can count, and and frankly, years where there wasn't emotional wear and tear because they were just so laughably bad that nobody even cared about them. Yeah. So to then be the team that went 30-11 in the first half of the season, that was on pace for 60 wins, and then to have couple of those bad losses kind of reminding you of last year, the Charlotte game, the San Antonio game, even some of those games they won where they didn't really close things out in satisfying fashion. Some of those without Conley started to feel, you're right, like last year, started to feel like before they got Conley, when D'Angelo Russell was the point guard. Not to speak entirely ill of D'Lo, like he's a good basketball player, but there was an immaturity about this team when he was the point guard. So yeah, to win this game without Conley is important, and it kind of feels like it restored, like you said, some of the swagger to the team, but also like fans can feel, okay, yeah, maybe it's just for a little while. Maybe they'll be, back in panic mode and with the next loss. But
Yeah.
it feels like they kind of needed that to make people think, okay, yeah, all right, this is still a really good team. They've still got some things to go through, but they kind of righted the ship.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need it for the fans to kind of excel and feel better about where things are going. But I think they need it for themselves because they were just not playing well. The turnovers, they had a few the other night, but I think they had 12 or 13 for the game. And it wasn't, they weren't the ones that just, you had a bunch of empty possessions in the fourth quarter where you weren't doing anything. And I like the way that this game went back and forth. And yes, the Thunder was on a back-to-back, but I think they rested some of their key players the night before when they had a really bad performance themselves. So it was a game where they had to grind it out, and it went back and forth, and they needed to make clutch plays. And so I think they needed that for themselves because was it last week that Chris Finch called their performance disgusting or immature?
Yeah. It was after the Charlotte loss when Cat had 62, but they went, they just got kind of careless in the fourth quarter and lost.
Yeah, so I think they need to, for themselves, to kind of show themselves how they get back to how they know they can play in the right way, taking care of the ball more than they have been of late. I think you saw the defensive effort from Gobert and McDaniels particularly was outstanding, and that kind of sets the tone. And you saw J-Mac come in and make a key contribution. Some of the guys that, Finch went away from Shake Milton in this, where he's been in the rotation and really struggling. I mean, that's what people have been clamoring for. We'll see how long Kyle Anderson, keeps playing an integral part here because his offense has really struggled this year. So some of that's still trying to figure out. I think Finch in his mind, like, can this guy be trusted? Is he going to be part of the thing? And that's something to be sorted out. But to me, it comes back to your stars, Edwards and Towns, and playing the right way and playing together the right way. And when they do that, combined with their defense, and then when you get Mike Conley back, I think we're going to see that team we saw in November and December because they're too talented and too good defensively to have the kind of sloppy performances that we've seen the last 2 weeks.
They do seem to have the right mix. That said, I also wonder, what sort of information beyond maturity they're hoping to get from these kind of minutes without Conley. I think he's missed 4 of the last 5. He had, game of rest. He had the illness. Now they're saying hamstring tightness. Trade deadline's about a week away. I have a hard time figuring out exactly what this team needs, aside from they could probably use more shooting, a little bit more offense, but at the expense of what? If you're sitting there kind of picking the ideal trade, did you learn anything from these handful of Conley free games as to what you might want to add?
Well, you always want more shooting, right? Here's the question to you, Mike. Do you trust J-Mac as that second team point guard?
Or do you trust Nickeil Alexander-Walker too? I mean, he's kind of been your starting point guard when Conley's out. He's not really a point guard, but is that enough? I guess that's the question. Is that enough?
I don't know. J-Mac played great last night. I mean, the threes were obviously important, but I think he got him in offenses and initiated well. It's just, we saw him struggle in the playoffs last season. So I still think if I was Tim Conley, I'd be looking for guard help to give, a veteran presence that, if Conley's out, you have somebody that you feel comfortable with, or when he's, you go to your bench that you feel like you have a reliable option there.
Yeah, that feels right to me. I think they hope that would be Shake Milton, and they don't have a whole lot of assets to trade. I mean, you do start to wonder, as an expiring contract, you have Kyle Anderson. He's still got value though. He's not had a great first, 45, 46 games of the season, but he was really good for them a year ago. He kind of held that thing together. He's insurance against any kind of injury to any of your other 3 big men that are getting, most of the big man minutes. Would you consider him someone you would trade?
Well, it's interesting because I really liked him last year.
Yeah, he was great.
And his struggles this year it really and the impact it has on the offense, it really gives you pause about, because it's been extended. This is not just like one bad week, right? It gives you pause about, man, how is he going to help you down the stretch? Is there something going on here? Is it something he can get past? Can you trust him as you go on down the stretch? So I know Finch loves the contributions that he can bring in different areas, but his struggles offensively are just glaring and alarming. And so, I think, you say, would I be willing to trade him? Yeah. I mean, listen, see what what the offers are there. I don't know what the value would be there in terms of what you get in return, but I still think if you can add a veteran guard, I think you'd feel a lot better about, your second unit and being able to, when you do go to the bench, that the offense is not just going to, fall apart and you're not going to have options out there.
You have to go for it in a certain regard, right? Not like, hey, this is our only chance, blow it all, everything into this year, no, the future be damned. But, these opportunities don't come all that often, right? Like the West is good, but kind of open. Like Denver's still really good. They're going to be the team to beat when the playoffs come along, even if they're not the number one seed, whoever the number one seed is. Oklahoma City is intriguing. The Clippers are really coming on strong, but there's not like that one team where you're like, they could never compete with them. Why does it even matter? Like it's open enough, at least to win a playoff series or two, that, a franchise that hasn't had a lot of that success and wants to take a step, this is a year to do it.
Well, and Mike, they get the best record in the West,
yes,
and it's not been a fluke. And that clock started ticking the moment they made the trade for Gobert.
Yes.
So that was not done with 4 years down the road in mind. Like this was not a competitive rebuild. They made that bold decision to bring in Gobert because they wanted to win now, contend now. And so this is their window. And when you look at these, the contract situation and all the big, financial commitments that they made to this roster, this is a front office that's saying, we expect to be good now and contend now. And so you say you have to, think big. I just don't know what with their contract situations, like what kind of moves could you make? But I think the expectation should absolutely be high based on the way they played the first half of the season and also what this roster is, because that was the other thing about, I go back to that maturity. It's like, they're being immature, and this is like, well, this is not a young team.
No, it's not. Not at all.
This is not a young team anymore. I mean, the guys that have been together for a long time, or been, the core, Towns has been here, a long time. Mike Conley's a veteran. Rudy Gobert's. I mean, this is an established group of veterans here. And even though Ant's young, he's played a lot of NBA basketball, right?
This is his fourth year for him and McDaniels. They're not young by NBA standards anymore. They have experience.
Exactly. And so that's why I think, I mean, the expectation should be that whatever it takes to make this team good as they head into the playoffs, or better as they head into the playoffs, they have a legitimate chance to really do some, make some noise. And that's what they need to do it, to the extent that Conley can do that with all the different contracts he has.
One more probably guard, solid rotation player is probably like what we're asking for here. Like that feels like one more guy that you really trust, not like hey, let's try this. Probably going to be pretty good on most nights. That's scary in the playoffs. You got to have trust in the playoffs. And
don't you think, Mike, that we've focused so much on their offense because it's without Conley, it's been disjointed. It's been the fourth quarter offense has not been good. The turnovers are, maddening. I feel like they can clean it up, but I feel like this team is predicated on being really good defensively. And if that's the starting point for who you are, that gives you, I think, something to really feel good about going into the second half of the season into the playoffs. Yeah, and our colleague Jim Suhan wrote about this, I don't know, it was a while ago, but like Tyus Jones, I know he's one of us, but he, every time I think of what they could use, it's kind of someone like him or him specifically. Yeah, if you could find a way to get Tyus here, I think you do that because he would feel a lot of holes or anxiety or whatever you have about that part of the equation.
Yeah, I think so too. A couple more things I want to pick your brain on before we go. Kind of on the subject of trades still, and this isn't a potential trade. This is a trade that happened this week. Jorge Polanco to the Mariners. Twins get a bunch back, maybe more, at least more in volume than I imagined Jorge Polanco would fetch at this stage of his career. They get two pitchers who were major league contributors last year. The starter didn't have a great year, but he's had better years in the past. He's 33. The reliever they get, is kind of maybe is the kind of 1-year wonder guy, but could be a seventh, eighth inning solution. And then two prospects, one of whom is top 5 in the organization. That was more than I thought they were going to get for Jorge Polanco.
Yeah, and it's obviously Polanco has been a productive player for them for a while here, and anytime you lose that, it's tough. But there was a log jam there, and with Brooks Lee, I think it's going to contribute to that log jam. He was at AAA last year and then one of the top prospects, and so you got to clear a path for him somehow. And so to get pitching back in return. The reliever is coming off, I forget his name right off the top of my head, but he's coming off a career year for him. Is that something that he can sustain again this year? This feels like a good return that Falvey got for Polanco, for a guy that, I think most people looked at him and Kepler as the most logical choices to move.
Yes.
We'll see if Kepler's still here, but I think they got a good return for that. Considering, this TV deal and not knowing how much money, you're going to have to spend because of the lack of clarity there is, I don't want to give them a blanket pass for their inactivity this offseason, but you have to factor in, that part of the equation that you're missing a big chunk of your money that you otherwise know what you're going to have. And so this trade gets the money back. Brings in two, the starter pitcher is going to be slotted in probably as your number 5 or a depth guy, and then you help your bullpen. So I think they probably are happy with what they got coming back.
Relief pitcher is Justin Topa, and the starter is Anthony DeSclafani. Both those guys like in their early mid-30s, like veteran guys, kind of not rolls of the dice, but both, one of them just had the 1 year, but it's really good. And the starter, Anthony DeSclafani, is a guy who wasn't very good last year, had some injuries in 22, was really good in 21. It could be kind of like, are they catching him on the right year? And sometimes that's what it is with these guys, right? Like you just don't know the exact year you're going to get from some of these, lower roster guys. They got a lot of really good years from guys like that last year that kind of covered for how injured, Byron Buxton was, how injured Carlos Correa was, even though he was in the lineup, he just wasn't as productive as much as they missed Royce Lewis. Like they had a lot of guys who stepped in, your Donovan Solanos, Willie Castro's, guys like that, who had probably exceeded expectations. They kind of need that from pitching this year if they're not going to go and do a 1-for-1 replacement for Sonny Gray.
Well, that's it. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to replace they're not going to go out and their trade chips are not going to net you Sonny Gray, and you're just
not unless you dip into that prospect pool.
And I don't think they're willing to part with a Brooks Lee or one of their top prospects at this point. I wouldn't either. Yet their track record has been, some misses and some hits in terms of those gamble on guys that are veterans that have been up and down in their career. So you don't really know which guy you're getting. They're hopeful that they will get the positive, but we've seen a lot of misses on that side too. So, but I don't think I would be willing to part ways with Brooks Lee because I don't know that you're going to get that frontline pitcher that's what Sonny provided them, and that's a Cy Young type level performance. I just don't believe you're going to get that.
Now they did get a pretty good prospect from guy who's number 5 in the Mariners ranks right now, Gabriel Gonzalez. That's it's another possible trade chipper. Makes you feel better about your future depth. But yeah, I think you're right. I don't. It's going to be interesting. I just pitching was so much of their strength last season. It's kind of like thinking about the Wolves and defense, where you can't imagine them trading away or kind of going away from that strength at any point. But it's going to be hard for them to duplicate what they do last year, unless, I had Glenn Perkins on last week. He's big on not a bounce back year, but a full good year from Joe Ryan. And if you think Joe Ryan is your number 2 starter, then maybe you're going to be okay there.
Yeah, I mean, there are guys that they have belief in that have shown flashes of being the type of pitchers that they envision, but you just don't have the full body of a resume where you're like, okay, we feel 95% sure that this is what he's going to produce. They're hopeful, and guys, if Joe Ryan can have that bounce back, then you feel a lot better. But I don't think it's one of those ones that it's a slam dunk. You know what you're going to get.
Royal Credit Union's Smart Checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union Smart Checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
Final thing, I think a Vikings storyline we're not talking about enough, Chip, is the TJ Hawkinson torn ACL, MCL towards the end of the season. He just had his surgery Monday, the team announced. So that was January 29th. That puts him about 6 months out from training camp from the time of the surgery. How much is he going to be able to contribute next year? That's a pretty aggressive timeline if you're hoping for anything more than a handful of games from him next year, even with how fast these guys can come back from ACLs these days.
Yeah, and I assume this was the plan all along based on reports from Ben Gessling wrote that they wanted the MCL injury to heal itself first before they did the surgery, which I guess is standard procedure. This is you can just envision you get to camp and he has to open up on the pup or whatever, because it's just that timelines would be awfully aggressive to be ready to go. So these, those injuries tend to take longer than you think they might, and hopefully he's his rehab goes smoothly and he can get back quicker than maybe we're expecting. But is he going to be ready for opening game?
7.5 months. I don't know.
I don't know that he was going to sit here and say that. So and then we've seen it time and time again. It just takes time for coming off that injury, the ACL, and then you had the the MCL with it, to get back to where he was and feel like he's regained the confidence, the strength, all those things. It just takes time, and so it may be a little disjointed for him at the start of next season.
Yeah, and whoever's throwing him the ball, I mean, that's just it's a big part of their offense. Like, he caught so many passes for them, 90-plus catches this past year. Caught a ton of balls after he came over in that mid-year trade. I think like 60 in 10 games when he came over in that mid-year deal from Detroit. I mean, I don't know. I think it's an undervalued part of the offseason conversation. It's like they got all these guys that are deciding about Kirk Cousins. They're deciding about, we got to give Jefferson his extension. What are they going to do with Neil Hunter? Are they going to finally draft anybody worth anything aside from Jordan Addison? But Hawkinson, I don't know. I worry about that if I'm them, because he's a big part of their offense. And if he's missing for half the year or more than that, I don't like their chances early on, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's you have to find somebody that's going to feel, step up and take that production that he gave you. But, this is a guy that you've invested a lot of money in already. And so you have to think long-term with him and his health and his future, and you can't rush, not that they would anyways, but you can't rush that recovery. But that is a big chunk of the offense that you're taking out that has to be made up somewhere else by, someone. And so, yeah. But again, we'll see how much of the offense or how much of the season he possibly can miss. But I think it's more guys don't really feel like themselves right away. Even when they're cleared to play, it just takes time for them to get back to who they are. And so we'll see how long that process takes.
We will. And we'll see how the Wolves do. We'll see if the Twins make more moves. I'm sure we'll have you on again soon, Chip. But until then, enjoy a little bit of time off. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Mikey. See you, man.
Really good stuff from Chip, as always. Always happy to bring him onto the show, talking about a bunch of stuff. Circling back to the Timberwolves, let's finish with the cooler. Two things. Number one, like I referenced at the beginning of the show, NBA came out with its 2-minute report. They do these things where they kind of look at the last 2 minutes of every game, and I don't know why they don't do this with the whole game. Like, make the whole plane out of the black box kind of thing. Like, why don't you evaluate the entire game? I get it that things get magnified in the final 2 minutes, but why not look at all the calls in the first 46 as well? Anyway, they do a 2-minute report to kind of see if there was some egregious or missed calls in that time. Obviously, there usually are. Referees, officials are human, things like that. This is the galling thing, though. They say that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, quote, brought his hand down towards Anthony Edwards. This was a dunk with about 1:58 left in the game, so it barely made the 2-minute report. If Wolves fans, if Edwards were hoping to get some sort of sorry, we missed a call there, there should have been an and one when he dunked the ball against the Thunder the other night. In that win, by the way, the Wolves won the game, so it's not like this, oh, what could have been if this had been called kind of moment. But Ant clearly got fouled on the play. He got hit on the arm as he was going to the hoop, and he yelled for a foul as he was going off. He was mad. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander shot 16 free throws in that game. Ant's mad about that already. So at the very least, this 2-minute report gives you a chance to say, whoops, we messed up, our bad. We'll try to get it better next time. Instead, the 2-minute report says Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, quote, brings his hand towards Edwards' arm, and the contact during the shot near the rim is marginal. Marginal contact. I don't know about that. It's not marginal to me. That contact seemed pretty marginal. I don't know about you guys, but Wolves fans were up in arms. They were, showing the still image of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander basically holding on to Ant's left arm as he's going up for the dunk. I don't know. People want to get mad about this. I think it's reasonable to get mad about this. It's reasonable to let it go at a certain point. Chris Hine had a good piece in today's Star Tribune and online about Edwards' quest to get more foul calls, how he's been trying to get that, how he wants that star treatment, which he probably deserves based on how he's played this year, how he wants to get those calls. And maybe this was frustration on his part more than anything, but marginal contact felt like more than marginal contact to me. But you know what? They won the game anyway, so we'll see. We'll see. This is probably just a one-day story. They'll let it go at a certain point, at least until they play Oklahoma City again, which would have to be the playoffs because they're done playing in the regular season. Maybe there would be a bunch more games. That would be a fun series if it happened in the postseason. Now, Wolves' quest to get there goes against Dallas tonight, a much easier task than it usually would be. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving out for this game. Both of them missing in action. Wolves a huge favorite now. And that's big because this is the last regular season meeting between these teams as well. Wolves have a 2-1 season series edge. Would have any kind of home court advantage should these teams meet in a in kind of any kind of tiebreaker, any kind of situation later if they win this game. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, an easier test, obviously, with no Luka, no Kyrie for Dallas. Mike Conley might play, might not play. He's still questionable. He's got that hamstring. He's missed a few games here with various things, rest, illness, ailments, things like that. I'm curious what's going on there. I want to see if they're going to add something at the deadline like Chip and I talked about. But for right now, what's in front of them is Dallas, and a much diminished Dallas team from what you might normally find. That will do it for me today. Bobby Nightingale Jr. is going to join me on Thursday's show to talk Twins, Polanco trade, what's yet to come this offseason, so stick around for that on Thursday. Until then, have a great rest of your Wednesday. Back at it again tomorrow.